Good morning, girls. In the last session of Oracle, we completed our third unit, that is Oracle databases and concurrency control using log. Right now, we reach on unit number 4. Let us see what is the title of this unit: Introduction to PLSQL and advanced PLSQL. So mainly it is divided into two sections, right? The first one is the introductory part of PLSQL, and the second part will cover all the advanced concept of PLSQL. Here in the first part, in the beginning, we will cover the difference between SQL and PLSQL, as we have already learned everything about SQL, right? Structure query language. Now we will see the difference between what procedural language SQL and simple SQL. Then later we will cover the block structure or basic structure of PLSQL and the language construct of PLSQL, that means the variables, basic and composite data types, conditions, loopings, etc. Right? Then we will also cover the meaning of percent type and percent row type. Then cursor, exception handling, creating and using procedures. Then in advanced SQL we will cover functions like packages, triggers, creating objects, and some more objects that we can create through PLSQL. Right, the weightage of this chapter is 20%. Okay, so let us begin with introductory part of PLSQL. Let us see what is the difference between SQL and PLSQL. Before we start how to create a block of PLSQL, let us go through the concept. The SQL stands for Structure Query Language, which is mainly used to issue or execute a single query with insert, update, delete, or select, as we have done till all examples, right? User cannot be able to execute multiple statements at a time, as we have already done in our Oracle window. At a time we can execute only one statement, no more statements, or not more queries together, right? Now PLSQL. What about PLSQL? Let's see. The PLSQL stands for Procedural Language Structure Query Language. I repeat the full form: procedural language. PL means procedural language, and SQL is structured query language, in which user will be able to execute multiple queries. See, in normal SQL we cannot execute more than one query at the same time, but sometimes it happens that the need arises that we must execute more than one query at the same time. In that situation, the PLSQL is very useful to us, because we can execute more than one query, means multiple queries at the same time. PLSQL is proper programming language where user can use the programming concepts like looping, if, which we have already used in other programming languages like C, C++, right? So here we can say that PLSQL is a proper programming language, because here you can cover the concept of like looping and if then else, right? Like other programming languages, to execute our multiple statements, multiple queries at the same time. The bunch of SQL statements are used in one PLSQL program. You can combine more than one SQL statements in a single PLSQL program, right? Let us see how both are different than each other. Here you can see the difference is given. The left column is all about SQL and the right column is all about PLSQL. SQL, the full form of SQL is structure query language, whereas the full form of PLSQL is procedural language, structure query language, which is used as a programming language in databases. This is a programming language. SQL is not a programming language, right? We can use the SQL's statements in our PLSQL, but vice versa is not possible. SQL simply used to perform DDLs like data definition languages like insert, update and delete and select, and DMLs with using single query at a time. You can define a table and you can query that particular table. Now PLSQL, this is a block of code embedded within SQL statements which is used to add some business logic using programming concepts, right? If you want to add some your logic in your program, if you want to insert some specific type of records in your database, so you can put the condition through the programming concept, right? SQL is called as declarative language used to define what needs to be done, whereas PLSQL is called as procedural language which is used to define how the things should be done. Okay, SQL executes as a single statement, whereas PLSQL executes in the form of whole block. The code of PLSQL is always written into the block. We'll know about the structure of PLSQL later on. In the next topic we will cover the thing, right? We will cover how to define a PLSQL. The main use of SQL statement is to process and manipulate the data. The SQL statements are mainly used for reporting purpose, whereas the PLSQL statements are used to perform the transaction to the databases, and PLSQL is mainly used to build the application logic. You can apply the logic whatever you want, right, for your business. You can restrict the record that you want to enter in your database. SQL directly interact with the database server, and in PLSQL there is no interaction between database server, right? Database and server. User can add SQL into PLSQL statement, but user cannot add PLSQL into SQL statements, means vice versa is not possible. So these are the main difference between SQL and PLSQL. Let us see the structure of PLSQL, how we can define a whole block of PLSQL. In PLSQL, as in most other procedural languages, the smallest meaningful grouping of code is known as a block. As you have already studied in C and C++, that there is one specific block of code, right? You have to follow that sequence for executing your statements. Same here in PLSQL block, we will write some meaningful statements in a group, and that group of code is known as a block. Further, a block is a unit of code that provides execution and scoping boundaries for variable declaration and exception handling. Here you can declare your own variables, even you can initialize that variables, and you can handle the exception as well. Again, you have studied about exception in C and C++ subject, even in PHP, right? Same thing you can apply over here. PLSQL allows you to create anonymous blocks. Anonymous blocks means the block without having a name, right? Sometimes we will define a block that do not have a name. that type of block is known as anonymous block. Other than anonymous block, we can define name blocks, which may be package, procedures, functions, triggers, or any object types, right? We will cover this concept in our advanced PLSQL. Just begin with the block of PLSQL. It has mainly 4 different sections, only one of which is mandatory, and remaining 3 you can omit that 3 sections, right? Let us see all the sections one by one. The first section is our header section. This section is used only for name blocks. If you want to define anonymous block, then no need to declare this section. You can omit this part. The header determines the way the name block or program must be called. This is optional, right? If you don't want to call this block of code in future in any other programs, then you can omit this portion. The second section is called declaration section, which declares variables, cursors, and subblocks that are referenced in the execution and exception section. Again, this section is optional section. As per requirement, you can declare your variables, cursors, or subblocks, right? So it is not mandatory. Then third section is execution section. In this section, statements of PLSQL runtime engine will execute at runtime, and this section is mandatory, right? We must write something in this part, because without this section and our block is meaningless. We can say that if we omit this section, then it will be no use of this block, right? The fourth section, again, this section is optional, which can handle exception to normal processing. It can produce warnings and error. As per requirement, we can define a code in this section also, right? This is not a mandatory part. Now let us see the pictorial form of PLSQL block. For a procedure, this is a pictorial format, or we can say that PLSQL block structure. Girls, this question is very important for your final exams, right? Always they ask, explain the PLSQL block structure with diagram. So you can write all these things in your answer, right? And even you can draw this figure for your answer. Here you can see the header part, declaration part, then begin as a keyword to start the execution section, right? Then exception part will come, which is not mandatory, and at the end we will write end of block. Here the figure shows a procedure containing all 4 sections of the elements of a block. This is particularly start with the begin keyword, right? And procedure is again a keyword, and like all blocks ends with the keyword end. This is just an example I am showing you. Later on I will teach you how to define a block. First we will start with the anonymous block only, right? Here no need to worry. We'll start with anonymous block. This is just an example. You can see here the header part. Header, as I told you, that you can define a name block. If you want to define a name block, you must include a header part. So this is our header part, right? Here you can give a name to your block. As you can see in the example, get happy is a name given to this block. This is a procedure, okay, and it has some parameters also, which is covered in this pair of parentheses. Then declaration section. This section has a variable declaration, cursor declaration, whatever our requirement is. Here you can see one variable is declared of type date. Then third section is execution section. In execution section, we'll declare all the statements. We will cover all our SQL statements in this section only, right? Whether it may be insert query, delete query, update query, whatever you want to write, you can write in this particular section under the heading begin. How we will come to know that our execution section is start now? For that, you have to write a begin keyword, okay, and under this title we will write our SQL queries. As you can see here, one insert query is written over here, and one assignment, the assignment to the variable is also done in this section, okay. Then fourth section is our exception section, which is not compulsory. This is optional part. Here you can manage the errors, okay. So all the errors you can cover in this area, and our whole block of PLSQL ends with the word end, okay. So this is an example of complete PLSQL name blocks, which has all these sections, right, which is having all the sections covered here. Now we will discuss basic syntax of PLSQL, which is a block structure language. This means that the PLSQL programs are divided and written in logical block of code. Each block consists of 3 subparts. Here you can see the name of section, declaration. This section starts with the keyword declare, okay. Always you have to write a keyword in the beginning, declare. It is an optional section and define all variables, cursors, subprograms and other elements to be used in the program. If you don't want any variable, any cursor, any subprogram to declare for your current program, then you can omit this section, right? Then no need to write this keyword. Then executable commands. We will cover all executable commands in this area. This is known as execution section, right? As we have seen in the this example, this section is enclosed between the keywords begin and end, and it is mandatory section. It consists of the executable PLSQL statements of the program. It should have at least one executable line of code, which may be just a null command to indicate that nothing should be executed, right? If you do not include single statement in this area, then your PLSQL block will not work. So this part is mandatory, and at least one executable line should be there. Next is exception handling. This section start with the keyword exception. This is optional section and contain exception, single exception or more than one exceptions that handle errors in your program, right? If there is a chance to arise an error in your program, that can be handled through this section. Here again you have to keep one thing in your mind, that PLSQL statements ends with a semicolon. Every time you have to put semicolon at the end of each statement. Okay. PLSQL blocks can be nested within other PLSQL block using begin and end. As I have shown you the structure, you can even combine more than one PLSQL block, that is called nested PLSQL block, and you can define your internal PLSQL block using begin and end statement. Here is the basic structure of PLSQL block. See, declare, then we will cover declaration section. Okay, this is required for name block, then begin. Here we will put our executable commands. Then next is exception. This area will handle the exception, right? And we will complete our PLSQL block with the keyword end. Okay, let us try to understand this block with the help of example, right? Let us begin first example. Here we want to print a hello world in on our SQL editor window, right? So we need to open SQL window, open it, Scott and Tiger. Now first of all you have to set one environment variable, that is set server output on. This is called environment variable. If you want to display some result on your screen, you must start this environment variable. For that we have to give a command set server output on. You notice one thing, there is no space between server and output. You have to write both the words jointly, right? This will not show you anything on the screen. The server output is on now. This is understood. Okay, now let us begin our first anonymous block for printing hello world on this screen. For printing a line, we will use dbms output.putLine. As you have done in all programming language, you started with just printing a hello world. Same we are also doing in dbms, right? In PLSQL we also begin with the same program. We want to print a hello world on the screen. For that we will omit first two sections as well as exception section. We will not cover these sections. We will include only the mandatory part. Okay, begin is a keyword. Don't put the semicolon at the end of this keyword. Begin. Then we will write dbms underscore output, dbms underscore output. This is same as printf line in your C language, right? Then put line, put underscore line. I repeat, જેમ તમે C ની અંદર printf use કરો છો કોઈ પણ સ્ટેટમેન્ટને પ્રિન્ટ કરવા માટે, similarly here in Oracle, in PLSQL, we will use dbms underscore output dot put line to print something on our editor, right? Then pair of parentheses, single quotation mark. Here I will write hello world, single quotation mark over and bracket over, As I told you, don't forget to put semicolon at the end of each line except begin and end. This is an end of our program, so we'll write end keyword and semicolon. Then we will do the symbol of slash to execute this group of code, right? This is a group of code and this is called block. This is called anonymous block because we have not defined any name for this block, and press enter. Here on the screen you can see the message hello world, and exactly below this PLSQL procedure successfully completed. We got the message. This is our default message. Every time whenever you execute your block, this line will be printed automatically, right? PLSQL procedure successfully completed. Let us switch back to our document. The second example you can see on the screen. Here I want to define a one variable. For that, what I have to do is I have to use the first section, that is declaration section. Again, this block is known as anonymous because we have not defined any name for this block, right? Before we do the example number 2, let me print some other line. For that I will write begin, okay, dbms underscore output dot put underscore line into bracket, print your message. This is my second PLSQL block. Single quotation mark, semicolon, end of our block, semicolon, and for the execution we will do slash and press enter. Okay, this is my second PLSQL block. Let us repeat the code. This time I'll write same code in small letters. It doesn't make any difference, okay, whether you are writing your program in small letters or in capital letters. dbms underscore output dot put line into bracket. This is my second PLSQL block. End of block and slash. Okay, it doesn't make any difference if you write your whole program, whole PLSQL block either in capital or in small letters. The rules are same for Oracle SQL language and PLSQL, right? If you do the searching on any string, then at that time you have to consider the case. Otherwise, case sensitivity doesn't make any difference. So here we have gone through the first example. Let us do one more example. Here we will include the declare section, then execution section, these two sections only, no header section, no exception handling, right? Under the declare section we can declare the variables, cursors and subprograms. Here we don't know anything about cursors, we don't know anything about subprograms, so we will take only one variable, right? That you can very easily understand because you have already studied in C and any other programming languages, right? Here I want to declare one variable with name message whose data type is varchar2. As all of you are very well aware of the data types of Oracle, Varchar 2 is a data type available in Oracle, right? So message is a type of variable of varchar, and the length of this variable is 20. Then for the assignment we will use the symbol semicolon and equals to both together without leaving a space between these symbols, and equals to we will assign a string whatever you want to assign in it, that we have to enclose in single quotation mark. So here declare, let us write in capital, it looks more better, right? Declare, after declare no need to put a semicolon, come on the second line. Here message is a name of variable and the data type is varchar 2, length is 20. I want to assign a value in it. For that I have to do two symbols together, colon, equals to. See, I have not left any single space between these two symbols, right? Now enclose your string in a single quotation mark. Here I want to write hello, then comma, world, then an exclamatory mark I want, and then end of string. Okay, enclose your string in a single quotation mark, that's it. Then don't forget to put your semicolon at the end of this line. Okay, now we'll start execution section with the keyword begin. Begin is a keyword. All executable statements we will put under this keyword. Now I want to just print a message on the screen. For that I will write dbms underscore output dot put underscore line. dbms underscore output dot put line. Okay, even you can write this line in small letters. As I told you, you can do the mixing of capital and small letters also. As in the previous example, we have passed a static value hello world directly over here, right? Instead of that you can pass the name of variable, as we do in generally in other programming languages, right? MESSAGE, this is a name of my variable. Instead of passing a string, here I am passing a name of variable. This will ultimately replace by the string hello world. Hello world will be printed whenever we execute this anonymous block. Now semicolon. Okay, now keep one thing in your mind, that no need to cover this variable name in a single quotation mark. This will produce an error, not an error, but this will print a message on the screen, not the message the string stored in this variable, right? Let me show you. Here we got the message hello world. Now let us do the same program differently. Okay, inside the begin section we will write dbms underscore output dot put line, and I am enclosing message in a single quotation mark, semicolon, and press, and then end and semicolon. What will be the result? Guess karo અહીંયા result શું હશે? What will be the result? Yes, as a message, as a result we will get a result message, because your message is treated as a string, not as an variable, because I have enclosed this value in single quotation mark, right? So here the end lines signals the end of the PLSQL block. To run the code from the SQL command line, you may need to type slash at the beginning of the first blank line after the last line of your code, right? And whenever you execute your code, this will produce a result like this. We have already gone through the example, so okay. So this today we learn how to define a PLSQL block, right? And we omitted some optional sections. So in the next session we will cover the identifiers, how to give a comment, and many more things about PLSQL. Okay, see you in the next session. Thank you.